All right, everyone, let me ask you a question. What's the worst that could happen if you ignore a few minor mechanical issues on your 95,000-ton cargo ship? Well, it turns out 6 people are dead, a bridge collapsed, and a major US port has been shut down for months. And that's just for starters. Welcome to the story of the Dali, a cargo ship that wasn't just a vessel. According to the US government, it is a floating monument to greed, incompetence, and negligence. And this isn't just a freak accident. The disaster was practically gift wrapped and delivered by the ship's owners. You know, the people who thought they could save a few bucks by holding the whole thing together with what amounts to duct tape and wishful thinking. So how did something like this happen? How do you let a ship capable of causing this much destruction sail in the first place? And who is actually going to pay for the $100 million mess they left behind? Today, we're going to dissect this legal catastrophe and show you how deep the negligence runs. Trust me, it's a lot uglier than you think. Let's break it down. Let's kick this whole thing off by talking about negligence. And boy, oh boy, did the owners of the Dali drop the ball. Straight through the Francis Scott Key Bridge and into the river. These guys were responsible for a 95,000-ton container ship, and they opted for the kind of shortcuts that would make a slumlord blush. Picture this. You've got a ship with ongoing power failures, serious enough that it results in complete loss of power. So what do? Do you fix the problem? Apparently, you don't. You slap a metal cargo hook onto the transformer and call it a day. It turns out that the Dali was like your beat-up car that barely starts, but you keep driving it because you think, it'll probably be fine. The ship's transformer, the electrical system that basically keeps the whole thing running, was so busted it was literally vibrating itself apart. The owners apparently knew this, and instead of, just fixing the thing, they decided to jerry-rig the whole thing with whatever scrap they had lying around. That's right, they used a metal cargo hook that was a brilliant solution to all their electrical problems. Because apparently, spending money on actual repairs is just too hard. And here is where the negligence kicks in. Negligence requires 4 major elements: duty, breach, causation, and damages. The owners had the duty to keep their ship in good working order. They breached that duty. And a result, 6 construction workers are dead, a bridge lies in pieces, and the shutdown of one of the biggest ports on the East Coast. That's what we call gross negligence in legal terms. When your behavior is so reckless, it's basically criminal. But somehow it gets even better. Because not only did they ignore the most basic of responsibilities, they also sent this death trap out into the sea while fully knowing it was unfit to sail. So let's talk about that unseaworthiness. So you're a shipping company, and you've decided to send your ship across the ocean. A pretty big responsibility, right? You might think your first priority would be making sure that your ship, actually works. But for the owners of the Dali, well, they weren't into that game. For them, the only requirement was that the ship actually floated, at least for the moment. Everything else, optional. Why bother with proper repairs when you can just hope that nothing explodes? Well, my friends, in maritime law, a vessel is supposed to be seaworthy, meaning that it's fit for its intended voyage. That's pretty simple, right? Apparently, not for the folks at Grace Ocean and Synergy Marine, the geniuses behind the Dali. The transformer, the heart of the electrical system, had been patched together more times than a bargain basement quilt. It was vibrating so violently that it was shaking loose everything around it, including cargo. But that apparently wasn't enough to stop them from sending it out onto one of the busiest waterways in the US. Under maritime law, the owner of a vessel has a non-delegatable duty to ensure its seaworthiness. And it doesn't matter if the owner didn't personally rig the transformer with the metal hook like they were trying out for a DIY reality show. If the ship isn't fit to sail, it's their fault, period. The fact that this ship was allowed to leave the dock is a little like sending a plane into the sky with one wing hanging by a thread. The result? It was catastrophic. Now, as if the negligence and unseaworthiness weren't bad enough, the owners tried to pull more stunts to avoid paying up. Yeah, they thought they could limit their liability, and you're gonna love this one. So after the Dali crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge and caused absolute chaos, what do the owners do? Do they step up and take responsibility? Well, of course not. Instead, they dust off what they think is an old maritime loophole, the Limitation of Liability Act of 1851. This law essentially lets ship owners cap their liability to the value of their ship after the disaster, as long as they can prove they had no privity of knowledge of the problems that it caused. Sounds like a sweet deal, right? The owners of the Dali thought so. They immediately filed a petition to limit their liability to a measly $44 million. You know, like pocket change, compared to the actual damage they caused. Now, here's the problem for the owners of the ship. To qualify for this legal protection, they have to convince the court that they had no idea that their ship was a ticking time bomb. And here's where things are starting to go sideways for them. The DOJ's lawsuit makes it painfully clear that the owners knew exactly what was wrong with their ship. The transformer had been a known issue for months, and instead of fixing it, the owners chose a more budget-friendly option, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best. The owners can't just play dumb and say they had no idea the ship was about to fail. The law here is fairly clear. If you knew your ship was a disaster waiting to happen, you don't get to hide behind the limitation. So that $44 million cap they were hoping for looks like it's not going to happen. But wait, for the owners of the ship, it somehow gets even worse. Because the government isn't just asking for compensation. They want to make sure these owners never try something like this again. How? Punitive damages, baby. So let's talk about that. Punitive damages is like the legal equivalent of your mom grounding you for a month because you broke a vase and then lied about it. But instead of the grounding, it's about making you pay. And in this case, making you pay hard. And that's exactly what the DOJ wants to do here. They're not just asking for a little compensation. They're looking to hit these owners with massive punitive damages to send a message. If you think you can cut corners on safety and get away with it, think again. In legal terms, punitive damages are awarded when someone's conduct is so outrageous, the court wants to punish them, not just compensate the victims. And let's be clear, the actions of Grace Ocean and Synergy Marine aren't just negligent. According to the DOJ, they're the kind of reckless, corner-cutting behavior that practically begs for punishment. This company put profits over safety, knowing full well their ship was unfit to sail, and they didn't care. They apparently figured, what's the worst that could happen? Well, as it turns out, the worst that could happen is this. 6 people died. The economic fallout from shutting down the Port of Baltimore was massive, and the environmental damage from the wreck is still being cleaned up. So the DOJ isn't just looking for a quick $100 million payout. They want punitive damages to make sure the ship owners feel every bit of the pain that's caused. And let's be real, that's exactly where this case is going. Punitive damages are begging to be applied. But somehow we're not done yet. This disaster wasn't just about the money and broken infrastructure. It took lives, destroyed livelihood, and caused ripple effects that are still being felt. So let's talk a little bit about the aftermath. The collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge didn't just leave a physical mess. It left an emotional and economic crater that's going to take years to recover from. And it all could have been avoided if someone had bothered to make sure their ship wasn't a death trap. As I mentioned before, 6 construction workers died in the collapse. These people were just doing their jobs, working on that bridge when it gave way underneath them, sending them into the water and their deaths. And while the lawsuits from their families are already in motion, no amount of money will bring these workers back. And then, of course, there's the economic impact. The Port of Baltimore is one of the busiest in the country, handling $80 billion of trade annually. When that port shuts down, everything grinds to a halt. Ships couldn't come in or out for months, costing businesses millions and causing a ripple-on effect across the entire region. And of course, we can't forget the environmental damage. When a ship of this size crashes into a bridge, it's not just steel and concrete in the water. There's oil spill, debris, and God knows what else to deal with. The cleanup alone has cost tens of millions of dollars, and the government wants every penny of it back. So where does that leave us? A collapsed bridge, a shattered port, and a legal battle that's only just beginning. All right, now I want to hear from you. Here's a couple questions for you to consider. First, should the owners of the Dali be hit with sky-high punitive damages, or do you think $100 million is more than enough to teach them a lesson? Do you think the U.S. government is overstepping by going after these foreign companies, or do you think they're completely in the right? And here's a fun one. If you were the judge, what would you do with these corner-cutting clowns? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm ready for the fireworks. Until next time, I've been Uncivil Law, and remember to keep it uncivil out there.